Dr. Velatran sat in the cold amphitheater of the Grand Zaroon Council, her breath slow and steady despite the pressure in her chest. Above her, an iridescent sphere of light, the traditional platform of judgment, hovered with ancient pomp, casting golden illumination over High Archon Zorak's 8 glistening limbs. "Let the record reflect a unanimous decision," he rasped, voice oily with satisfaction. "Species 0921 Sol 3, designated humans, shall be classified Tier 9, Utility Class." There was a strange echo in the silence that followed. It wasn't awe. It was the empty resonance of fools congratulating themselves before reading the fine print. Vela rose, brushing imaginary lint from her faded field jacket, the one she'd worn on her last trip to Earth. Her voice rang out, not loud, but deliberate. "You're about to make the most statistically idiotic mistake in the Compact's recent history." Zorak didn't even glance at her. "Dismissed, Doctor." And that was that. 400 years of imperial smugness sealed into a single gesture. Vela stood, unmoved. "For the record, you should have read the part where they turned microwave ovens into weapons during a food fight." A chuckle escaped from the corner, likely Drexen, the only counselor who ever listened to her, and even he only did it when drunk. Back on her decrepit courier shuttle, she stared at the stars through a scratched viewport, rage bubbling beneath her dry wit. Earth, for all its mess, didn't deserve this. Her reports had laid it out: erratic but inventive behavior, emotional volatility paired with a savant-like knack for technological adaptation, and an unparalleled talent for weaponizing sarcasm. The Zaroon took none of it seriously. In their hierarchy-obsessed minds, Earth's inability to coordinate a single global holiday meant they were no threat. Vela knew better. So when the first Zaroon extraction cruisers descended over Jakarta, Houston, and Lagos with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer through stained glass, she wasn't surprised. She was furious. It wasn't even a proper invasion, more like interstellar looting, backed by condescending pamphlets on how to adjust to useful labor roles. The humans' reply came in 3 stages: shock, memes, and then murderously. Creative improvisation. In less than a week, local resistance units had not only brought down 2 cruisers using modified oil rigs and scavenged satellites, but also uploaded intercepted alien propaganda onto TikTok, layered with dubstep and unflattering commentary. Zaroon morale took its first noticeable dip when their internal comms were flooded with auto-tuned remixes of their surrender demands. On day 10, a joint civilian-military group calling itself the Earth Concordat hijacked a lightly shielded observation vessel. What followed was either divine comedy or strategic genius, depending on your species. Maya Saul, an unassuming MIT dropout with a knack for breaking things beautifully, turned the vessel into a mobile broadcast hub. From it, they began transmitting uncensored footage of the occupation, complete with sarcastic voiceovers and helpful annotations. Vela watched it unfold from a remote colony data relay, equal parts horrified and vindicated. She forwarded every transmission to the Grand Council with the subject line, "Still sure about that Tier 9 label?" No reply. Earth's first declaration of galactic defiance came via a global broadcast in 72 languages. Admiral Kyle Heron, standing in front of a cracked UN flag stitched to an alien alloy backdrop, announced, "This isn't war. This is an unscheduled audit of your assumptions. We'll be brief." The message concluded with the words, "You brought this," flashing in Comic Sans. Within 3 weeks, the human Concordat had deciphered Zaroon phase lens drives, reconfigured a quantum beacon into a mass communication device, and installed a weaponized sarcasm filter that auto-responded to alien messages with passive-aggressive haikus. Bureaucratic chaos erupted across the Compact's middle sectors. Vela, returning to Earth for the first time in years, landed in a New Delhi repurposing yard, now retrofitted into a tech lab/coffee shop hybrid. The smell of burnt circuitry and espresso filled the air. Sol greeted her with a 2-finger salute and the words, "Welcome back to the petty resistance, ma'am." We've upgraded from chaos to organized mockery. Vela smiled for the first time in weeks. Let's make Empire cry. Meanwhile, across the Zerun Compact, reports began to surface. Ambassadors resigning, governors requesting asylum, soldiers refusing orders due to psychological fatigue caused by exposure to human humor. Zorak held a private council with his inner circle. They're fragmenting our protocols, he hissed, with laughter. No, sir, corrected his analyst, with camaraderie and repurposed plasma cannons. By month's end, Earth had done the impossible. It made resistance fun. And Vela Tran, long dismissed, now stood at the center of it. Quietly, efficiently, and with a whiteboard that read, Step 1, don't panic. Step 2, panic anyway, but use it productively. The war hadn't begun. The galactic power structure just hadn't realized it was already over. The Zerun Compact's second mistake, after classifying humanity as Tier 9, was assuming Earth's initial resistance was a fluke, a burst of chaos that would burn itself out like a chemical fire. By the time reinforcements arrived in orbit, humanity had already figured out how to tear apart their sensor grids with weather balloons and kitchen-grade lasers. On the edge of low Earth orbit, a lone repurposed orbital maintenance platform, once part of a defunct private space company, now served as a makeshift command hub. From there, Admiral Cale Harron coordinated the Punchback Initiative with a calm precision that infuriated the Compact's tacticians. He never raised his voice, never overpromised. When an intercepted Zerun message declared that Earth's countermeasures were incoherent and unsustainable, Harron simply raised an eyebrow and said, "Good, let's keep it that way." Lieutenant Maya Sol, meanwhile, had reverse-engineered the captured Zerun cloaking tech and was using it to mask entire cargo freighters that now roamed space-dumping propaganda beacons into hostile sectors. These beacons broadcast things like holographic caricatures of Zerun nobles trying and failing to understand human slang, dubbed with intentionally distorted translations. One skit, titled Diplomacy According to the Condescending Squidlords, went viral across 3 mid-tier civilizations and led to several Zerun embassy bomb threats, though humanity disavowed direct involvement with a smirk and a shrug. On Earth, scattered militias fused into a single force under the Earth Concordat, an alliance built less on hierarchy and more on competence, coffee, and Wi-Fi signal strength. Vela Tran, now acting as Earth's unofficial cultural liaison and reluctant public face, found herself in endless briefings, most of which she punctuated with biting sarcasm and field reports written like journal entries from a vacation gone wrong. She wasn't a soldier, but she understood systems and how to break them. Vela's plan wasn't to win a war. It was to make continuing one so uncomfortable that the Zerun Compact would beg for peace before they realized they'd already lost their reputation. Human diplomats, armed with charm, data packets, and backup memes, made first contact with the Riven worlds, civilizations also marked Tier 9 and largely forgotten by galactic politics. To everyone's surprise, humanity didn't demand alliance in return for tech. They offered free upgrades, open-source schematics, and something even rarer in galactic diplomacy, genuine respect. That gesture alone caused a diplomatic ripple, so severe that 7 independent sectors called emergency summits to debate the human question. On the battlefield, non-lethal neutralization became Earth's signature. EMP bursts, sound wave disorientation, nanobot entanglers, all designed to disable without killing. The message was clear. We could destroy you. We just choose not to. Not yet. Alien warships crashed with surgical precision into empty oceans and evacuated deserts. Human pilots left sarcastic apology notes, scrawled in electromagnetic graffiti, on enemy hulls. One simply read, "Your plasma shields were adorable. Here's a patch." As alien defectors trickled into Earth-controlled zones, they found clinics, translators, jobs, and food that wasn't a nutrient paste. Drexen, the ex-counselor who'd once snorted at Vela's theories, became the first Zerun official to defect, citing philosophical fatigue and allergic reaction to incompetence. Vela met him in Geneva's reclaimed Chamber Hall, now functioning as Earth's primary diplomatic zone. "You're late," she told him dryly as he slithered in. "Let me guess. Existential crisis en route?" Drexen folded two of his appendages in what might have been a shrug. "You people weaponized dignity. I wasn't prepared." The tide turned rapidly. By week 7 of the offensive, more than half of the Zerun's outer fleets had either been captured, disabled, or were refusing orders. Information packets dubbed "How to Build a Better Empire, a Beginner's Guide to Not Sucking" were distributed anonymously across the galactic net, loaded with human philosophy, satire, and embedded tech exploits. Compact worlds began questioning their loyalty. Some even sent messages of solidarity, using human-coded languages like English and Spanish as symbolic resistance. The galactic order, once calcified by age and arrogance, had begun to shift, and not because of military might, but because a species they deemed irrelevant had refused to shut up. As Vela stood before the transmission console preparing Earth's next diplomatic broadcast, this one addressed directly to the Compact Council, she sighed, cracked her neck, and said, "Let's see how they like being schooled by a Tier 9. Species with a vendetta and a really good VPN." The message she sent wasn't a declaration of war. It was worse. It was a declaration of independence and an invitation for the galaxy to join them, not as subjects, as equals. And the Compact, for the first time in millennia, had no idea how to respond. The halls of the Grand Zerun Compact had never been this quiet. Where once echoed the sound of deliberative pomp and ceremonial arrogance, now sat only the uncomfortable creak of denial. High Archon Zorak brooded in silence, watching his dominion fracture like brittle crystal under unexpected heat. Reports bled across his command interface, fleets standing down, border governors establishing independent accords with Earth Concordat envoys, entire sectors demanding reclassification hearings. It wasn't just rebellion, it was worse. It was paperwork. Endless waves of revised treaties, ceasefire conditions, citizenship applications filed in Terran standard formats, and most disturbingly, cultural exchange programs voluntarily joined by Tier 3 civilizations who found human sarcasm refreshingly direct. Vela Tran stood at the center of this unraveling, her reputation no longer whispered in academic corners, but openly debated in every diplomatic chamber across the stars. She wasn't just a xenologist anymore. She was the keystone to a new galactic order, whether she liked it or not. And truth be told, she didn't like it very much. She preferred research to speeches, calm observations to posturing. But now, every word she spoke sent ripple effects across species who had spent generations believing that humanity was a backwater accident with delusions of grandeur. At Earth's orbital Concordat hub, she watched a dozen alien ambassadors engage in a heated debate over the syntax of a human idiom. No chill. Maya Sol, feet propped on a glowing console, muttered, "They're trying to figure out if it's a weather phenomenon or a military doctrine." Vela didn't laugh. She just took notes. That's how it all started. Notes, patterns, observed shifts in tone. Because while the galaxy stared at Earth's suddenly terrifyingly efficient resistance, Vela focused on the real weapon, culture. Not guns, not ships, but ideas. Infectious, viral, beautifully subversive ideas. One Earth broadcast, a satirical drama called The Emperor's New Sanctions, became a cult phenomenon on over 200 compact-aligned worlds. Entire sectors began referencing scenes in their legislature. A former Zerun fleet commander went viral lip-syncing a line from the show. "Diplomacy is just warfare with better lighting." The Earth Concordat leaned in hard. They launched the Department of Tactical Comedy, an actual diplomatic initiative that weaponized entertainment to erode loyalty across the Compact. The results were staggering. Dissent became fashionable. Defection became noble. Human engineers began holding tech summits on planets the Compact hadn't visited in centuries, offering upgrades, education, and the galaxy's first open-source, military AI, intentionally capped to avoid abuse but powerful enough to completely eliminate the need for hierarchical war commands. Entire civilizations once cowed into silence now stood behind Earth, not out of fear, but because, for the first time, they were being offered dignity without taxation. And when the Compact tried to crack down, to reassert control, they ran into a problem. No one would fire. Their troops refused to execute mass arrests against people hosting pop-up libraries. Their ship captains stopped obeying orders that demanded orbital intimidation runs over refugee settlements. Zorak tried to blame external manipulation, mind viruses, tech interference. But deep down, he knew. Earth hadn't hacked their systems. Earth had hacked their values. At a secret session of what remained of the High Council, Zorak raged while Drexen, his former ally, testified via hologram from Earth's Concordat Hall. "You made us blind," Drexen said. "You taught us to fear anything unpredictable. So we ignored the most creative, most stubborn, most ridiculous species to ever reach space. And now they've outmaneuvered us with half the resources and none of the respect." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Vela sat in a darkened auditorium as Concordat envoys reviewed the preliminary charter for a reformed galactic order. It was messy, idealistic, and unfinished. But it was real. And it was hers. She spoke softly into the comm stream, her voice translated in over 400 languages simultaneously. "We're not here to replace your empires. We're here to offer you something they never could. An equal seat, a voice, and a chance to stop surviving and start mattering." As the applause swelled, not loud but unanimous, Maya nudged her shoulder and whispered, "So, are we winning?" Vela exhaled, long and quiet. "No, we're reprogramming the game." And in that moment, as former enemies submitted charter, Synons and compact territories fell into collaborative reform, it became clear. Earth hadn't broken the empire with violence. It had corroded it from within, using respect, humor, and inconvenient truth as scalpel and torch. The old order wasn't burning. It was being rewritten, one clause, one laugh, one impossible alliance at a time. The day the Galactic Concord was ratified, Dr. Vela Tran stood on a platform that didn't exist a year ago, an orbital ring station constructed jointly by 17 species, none of which had ever shared a zip code before humanity arrived on. The scene like a poorly timed miracle. Beneath her, the stars shimmered against the curvature of Earth. Its patched-together blue no longer the laughingstock of interstellar politics, but the gravitational heart of a movement that had redefined galactic balance without firing a single war-ending shot. The Zaroon Compact was technically still intact, but only on paper, like an ancient empire with no currency, no allies, and no one answering the phones. High Archon Zorak had retreated into seclusion, his once glorious council chambers now serving as a museum exhibit titled, "How Arrogance Dies." Former Compact loyalists, those who hadn't defected, fled, or taken up open mic night on Concordat-aligned stations, were forced to attend empathy retraining seminars hosted by humans and ex-counselor Drexen, who now wore ironic t-shirts that said things like "Tier 9 my ass." Vela, for her part, had changed little on the surface. Same plain jackets, same slightly tired eyes, but now every step she took echoed with the weight of reformation. She didn't carry authority like a weapon. She wore it like gravity, constant, invisible, undeniable. The final stage of Earth's ascension wasn't war, wasn't vengeance. It was something stranger, harder, rebuilding. The Concord wasn't just a political union. It was a reimagining. No species was allowed more than one vote. No civilization was allowed standing armies. Without universal oversight, education, technology, healthcare, shared. Not for control, but for resilience. Of course, there were outliers, fringe systems that mocked the cuddle fest and warned of Earth's manipulations, but they were ignored or, more often, invited. to talk it out over strong coffee and psychological warfare disguised as kindness. Admiral Cale Heron became the new head of strategic security, which mostly involved preventing people from inventing weapons that could delete continents by accident. "No war," he would say at every briefing, "but if you build one of those, again, we will politely dismantle it and send you cupcakes shaped like your capital city." Maya Sol, now revered as a kind of tech priest among engineering guilds across the Riven worlds, had just unveiled the Concorde's first faster-than-light drive, powered not by unstable fusion, but a hybrid of compacted graviton folding and recycled microwave cores. She called it the Coffee Ring Machiae. It looked like a chrome horseshoe dipped in sarcasm. And it worked. The galaxy didn't shift overnight. Some planets still clung to the old ways, some cultures mistrusted the idea of unity, and some just didn't. Like Earth's sense of humor. But the weight of change was irreversible. Humanity hadn't just fought off enslavement, they'd redefined what survival meant. Not domination, not superiority, just the stubborn refusal to let things stay broken. The final address to the assembled Concordat was delivered by Vela herself, streamed live to billions across the stars. She stood before them with no armor, no podium, just a datapad and a stare that could melt bureaucracy. "This started because someone put us in a box," she said, "a small one, Tier 9, disposable. And we decided that if the universe was going to judge us based on what we were, then we were going to change what it meant to be. This council, this Concorde, this mess, it's ours now, and it's not perfect. But perfection never built anything. Only persistence did. And spite. And a surprising amount of duct tape." Laughter rippled through alien species who had learned, slowly, to recognize the cadence of human sincerity hiding behind sarcasm. As she ended with a smile, small, ironic, but honest, she said, "Here's to the galaxy. May we never again underestimate what happens when you threaten a species that once invented memes before interstellar travel." The council chamber erupted, and somewhere, back on Earth, a child watched the broadcast on a tablet made from stolen. Zaroon Alloys leaned back and said, "Cool, I want to do that when I grow up." In the end, the galaxy didn't just change leaders. It changed languages, priorities, rules. It changed the very way it thought about value and voice. And the spark that lit the fire of that change wasn't a superweapon or a chosen one. It was a woman no one listened to, a planet everyone dismissed, and a culture built on refusal. Refusal to be quiet, refusal to comply, and most importantly, refusal to be less than they knew they were. Humanity didn't conquer the stars. They made the stars reconsider what it meant to belong to something greater. And then, with a wink and a spreadsheet, they built it.